Diego Maradona once said there was only one footballer alive he would pay money to watch. And he was just a skinny kid from a town nobody had heard of. Years before the world knew his name, a 15-year-old Lionel Messi told a magazine that the same boy was his idol. Johan Cruyff begged Barcelona to sign him over Ronaldinho, but the board said no. His name was Pablo Aimar, and the reason you barely know it is gonna break your heart.
Yo siempre dije que yo miraba mucho, me gustaba mucho Aimar.
Rio Cuarto sits in the middle of Córdoba province, 400 miles from Buenos Aires. On the 3rd of November, 1979, a boy was born there, weighing 3.4 kilos. His father, Ricardo, was an ex-player at Newell's Old Boys, and he slid the middle name Cesar onto the birth certificate. The man had not even kicked a ball yet, and his father had already named him after the coach who won Argentina its first World Cup. That tells you everything about the household Pablo Aimar grew up in. Football was not a hobby in that family. It was the air. A youth coach at Estudiante de Rio Cuarto, Alfio Mercado, saw him playing in the street one afternoon and did not bother holding a trial. He just signed him. By 14, River Plate had brought him to Buenos Aires. He passed their trial easily, and then he did something nobody expected. He went home. He missed his mother. He missed his brother Andres. He told his parents he was not going back. This is the moment most stories end, and you never hear the name again. But Pablo Aimar's did not, because a phone rang in the Aimar household one evening, and on the other end was Daniel Passarella, World Cup winning captain. The most demanding man in Argentine football was calling personally to convince a father to put his 14-year-old son back on the bus. So, Pablo went back, shared a boarding house room with 6 other boys. Up at 7 for school, then training. Years later, he described that first year with one sentence: the first year felt endless. But the years that came after that one buried any remaining doubt about who he actually was as a footballer. Between 1996 and the year 2000, River Plate won 5 league titles with him sitting right at the very heart of the team's attack. And in 82 professional appearances, the teenager produced 21 goals and 28 assists. He was still barely shaving in the bathroom mirror each morning, and he had already collected more domestic league trophies than most professional footballers managed to win across their entire careers. When the legendary Enzo Francescoli finally hung up his boots and retired for good, the famous number 10 shirt came off his back and went straight onto Aimar's young shoulders. And there is honestly no greater inheritance in the entire history of River Plate Football Club than that one shirt. His final game of that first River Plate spell came in December 2000, and by then, a wealthy club across the Atlantic Ocean was already wiring 24 million euros to make him their newest problem to solve. Valencia paid a club record fee for him in January 2001, and at just 21 years old, he walked into one of the strongest football sides anywhere in Europe at that moment in time. His first real test arrived a month later in the Champions League against Manchester United at the Mestalla, where his enormous Norwegian teammate Johan Cruyff patted him on the head before kickoff, like he was somebody's quiet little cousin who had wandered onto the pitch by accident. 20 short minutes later, Aimar was running directly past Wes Brown like he was not even there. He was embarrassing Jaap Stam in the air. He was leaving Roy Keane chasing his own shadow across the grass. He was making Paul Scholes look like a wide-eyed tourist in the middle of his own midfield patch. The game eventually finished 0-0 on the scoreboard, but every single person inside that stadium walked off the pitch knowing in their hearts that they had just watched something genuinely new arrive in European football that very night. Sitting quietly in the stands that evening was Johan Cruyff himself, talking about Aimar afterwards, the way that he had only ever talked about the players he secretly wished he had personally coached himself. 3 days later, Aimar came off the substitute bench at Las Palmas, won a free kick within 10 minutes of stepping onto the pitch, calmly curled it into the top corner, and his very first La Liga goal had taken him less time than your morning coffee break at work. The major trophies came rushing in after that night. Valencia reached the Champions League final under Hector Cooper and lost cruelly to Bayern Munich on penalty kicks. But the very next season, playing under Rafa Benitez, Valencia won La Liga for the first time in 31 long years. The year directly after that, Aimar tied with Manuel Rui Costa of AC Milan for the most assists in the entire Champions League competition. By the end of 2004, he had added another league title and a UEFA Cup, completing one of the most beautiful trophy doubles in the entire history of the proud club. Somewhere right in the middle of all of that brilliance on the pitch, Diego Maradona sat down with World Soccer magazine and delivered the sentence that absolutely should have changed the entire trajectory of his career forever. "Pablo is the only current footballer that I would pay to watch," Maradona said clearly, "and he is even more talented than Riquelme or Saviola." You really need to pause on that quote for a moment to let it sink in properly. Maradona pay money out of his own pocket to watch just one single player out of the entire global sport. That very same summer, Johan Cruyff privately sat down with the Barcelona board of directors and recommended that they sign 3 Valencia players together as one package deal: Aimar, Albelda, and Roberto Ayala. The Barcelona board ignored him completely and signed Ronaldinho, Deco, Edmilson, and Rafael Marquez instead of those 3. 2 of the absolute greatest minds in football history said the very same thing about him in the very same calendar year. And then his body began speaking a strange language that he simply could not translate. When Benitez left for Liverpool and Claudio Ranieri walked into Valencia, the starts became substitute appearances. The substitute appearances became bench warmings. And 3 different coaches arrived inside 18 short months, none of whom seemed to know what to actually do with him on the team sheet. Underneath all of it, the injuries had quietly begun stacking on top of each other in his medical file. Groin, head, hamstring, knees that simply would not stop barking at him every single morning. The body that had once been a full second ahead of everyone else on the pitch was now a deeply frustrating second behind itself. Real Zaragoza took a chance on him in 2006, but year 2 of that contract ended in relegation amid total financial collapse at the club, and the only real thing he gained from that whole painful period was a Spanish passport. The same man who had been tied with Rui Costa for Champions League assists just 3 years earlier was now stuck in a relegation battle while the European press quietly moved on to Ronaldinho, then Kaká. Aimar quietly became the answer to a trivia question that almost nobody could actually remember the answer to anymore. But he was only 28 years old at that point. He was not finished as a player yet, and in Portugal, a coach was just about to call his name. Benfica signed him in 2008 for €6.5 million, and most observers thought it was nothing more than a quiet pension move for a fading Argentine. What happened next became one of the most unexpected second acts in modern European football history. Javier Saviola, his old River Academy partner, arrived the very next season, and the two of them rebuilt their telepathic teenage understanding right inside the Estadio da Luz, with Cardozo up top and a young Angel Di Maria learning the game on the wing. That Benfica side won the Portuguese league in 2010 while scoring 78 goals across the season, the most in the entire division that year. In December 2012, the Champions League draw paired Benfica with Barcelona, and Aimar walked onto the pitch directly opposite the boy who had once told the world he was his idol. After the final whistle blew, they swapped shirts, and Aimar's number 8 Benfica jersey ended up framed on a wall inside Lionel Messi's house, placed deliberately between 2 of Messi's own Barcelona shirts on display. That is a thank you note that took 10 full years to deliver to its rightful owner. In 2013, he signed for Johor Darul Ta'zim in Malaysia and became the highest paid player in the entire history of the Malaysia Super League. While most footballers go to that part of the world specifically to quietly disappear from view, he went there to remember he could still play the game. By January 2015, he was home again at River Plate on a deal conditional on his heel healing properly, and at 35 years old, he made one final substitute appearance against Rosario Central while the crowd sang his name from the very moment he stepped onto the grass. 6 weeks later, Marcelo Gallardo, his old teammate, pulled him into a quiet room and told him he was not going to be in the Copa Libertadores semi-final squad. Aimar retired on the 14th of July, 2015, and the very next morning, Lionel Messi posted that one of his idols was retiring and thanked him for all the magic. In 2018, Lionel Scaloni took over the Argentina senior side, and Aimar joined the coaching staff. By 2022, Argentina were in Qatar for the World Cup. Then came the game against Mexico, and the broadcast camera somewhere in the second half found Pablo Aimar on the bench with both hands over his face, shoulders shaking, hyperventilating quietly, while Scaloni leaned over and put an arm around him to calm him down. Everybody assumed he was crying because Messi had scored. He was not crying for that. He was crying for the 22-year-old version of himself walking off that pitch in 2002. Finally, 20 years late, getting the night he never got, Argentina won the World Cup that month in Qatar. The kid from Banda Norte, who once had to be talked into staying in Buenos Aires, got the ending nobody, including him, ever expected at all. If this story moved you, drop your forgotten genius in the comments below.